Hey, it's Jeff Green with Green Financial Group. Thanks for tuning in the video blog today. Today is part 2 of our 3-part series with my interview with Brian Wesbury. Stick around. Be right back.
We are closer to what I would call state-run capitalism today than we have ever been in the history of the United States. They're building chip plants, for example, and windmill farms.
But chip plants, I think, are kind of necessary.
I totally agree.
They're all in China, right? Or in Taiwan is our last one, and then we kind of need something here.
I totally agree with that. Here's my argument against it, and this is that you can't beat China by being like China.
Correct.
And so what I'd rather do is cut tax rates on Intel and AMD, and I'm not actually cut it on all companies, and then have them invest their money, because the real problem is they fell behind. We had raised taxes too much. We put regulations. I mean, try building. I think one of the things about the CHIPS Act is they said, "Oh, don't worry about any of the environmental stuff. If there's a horned frog, like in where you want to build that plant, we're going to ignore it, and you can. It's shovel ready, in other words, and so." But in the end, we're trying to beat China by being like China instead of beating China by being more capitalist. And that's what worries me. So you're absolutely right about we need chips.
And you're talking about tax rates. Isn't the funny thing about tax rates, the lower the tax rates become, typically the higher the tax receipts for the government get, right? There's less incentive for us to avoid taxes. We don't all look for ways to avoid it. So
there's a perfect tax rate. If you go to 0, you get 0. If you go to 100, you get 0. And like if you're taxed 100%, you're not working. All right. Because you get nothing for it. So there's somewhere in between that's right. And I believe today we're higher than we should be. That if we did reduce tax rates, we'd get more revenue.
I kind of agree with you. But I agree with you a lot, because I think you're a smart guy. So you and many others were calling for a recession in 23, right? Didn't happen. Talk to us about just when you get this award, this great award of being the best forecaster ever, and now you got one wrong. The life of an economist, changes quickly. But a lot of people got that wrong. And what did we not see, or what did you not see, or how did we not have a recession in 20? Because I certainly thought one was coming. I would tout to my clients, look, I think we got a recession coming. I still think we have one coming. We're going to have to pay this piper. But talk to us about the what you see in recession, why we didn't have it in 23, what you think in 24, and where that may go.
We've kind of, what's great about our conversation so far is we've kind of skipped along the top of all those moguls already. And so what I felt like was the morphine was going to wear off. Milton Friedman is who really talked about the money supply and the Fed and the role the Fed has in the economy. And if the Fed prints $1 more of money, you end up with $1 more of spending. Well, during COVID, they printed $5.4 trillion more dollars. And then if you want to kind of count total spending, you use GDP. It's the kind of the best measure we have. And so the Fed printed $5.4 trillion. GDP was only up $4.9 trillion, which means we still had $500 billion to spend. So they had pushed money in so fast, the morphine, they put so much morphine in it that it hadn't worn completely off. And I didn't come to that realization until later on in this year, because if you look at the money supply growth, it's negative. It should have had an impact, but guess what? They had just pumped it in so fast. Our body wasn't able to absorb all the morphine to keep the analogy going. The second thing is that they doubled the deficit this year. We went from $1 trillion of a deficit in 2022 to a $2 trillion deficit in 2023. And that was the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. And never in my wildest dreams did I think we were going to be able to spend that much. One of the things that they did is that they put a part of the budget was $50 billion of aid to kind of Green New Deal projects, but they they created these rules to let you apply for that, which actually made it go to 250 billion. Mm-hmm. So companies and people were able to get 200 billion more stimulus out of the government because of the way they wrote them. So all the forecasts of how much we would spend were off. I'm not, first of all, even Congress doesn't read these laws.
Right.
And I don't even know if I would have known what I read. But somehow they left it open-ended and nobody caught it. Because all the people, all the economists in Washington, who they call it scoring. Like, how much is this bill going to cost? And they said 50 billion. Well, it ended up being 250 billion. So that's 200 billion of that extra $1 trillion deficit. So I think there's two things. We hadn't spent all the money yet that the Fed had printed.
So that was still kind of going through.
And they were somehow able to sneak more morphine in.
Okay.
And so, we're
a little addicted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You hit the button, and I've had surgery, so I know about the button. You hit the button and get a little more morphine. And but this year, we've now spent all the money that the Fed printed, and the deficit is going to be smaller this year.
Right.
And as a result, I think I keep believing in that basic theory that I have, that we have to pay a price for COVID and the lockdowns.
Yeah.
I think it comes this year.
What kind of severity do you see in that?
Yeah, it's small. Our forecast is a recession, minus 0.4%.
Okay.
So if you that's annualized, I started out, so it's 0.1% a quarter.
Yeah.
Not that it won't be perfect like that.
So in your opinion, we're not going to revisit 08 or anything like that?
No. Absolutely not. First, one thing to think about, and individuals really care about this, is housing. Housing is nowhere near. We haven't built enough houses since 2007.
Yeah.
And so housing and house prices, I think, are permanently higher because of all the money printing. We still have a shortage of housing. So housing it's not 08. What people do worry about is commercial real estate, especially in the big blue cities, Chicago, New York, San Francisco. They're going to have a problem. And banks that have loans to those projects or buildings, they're going to lose money.